Okay. Hi guys. So you're going to start your personal narrative. So this assignment, writing task, is meant to be creative, like the hero essay, but the structure is going to be entirely different. So we don't use highlighters for a personal narrative. We use highlighters when we write essays. So we just wrote an explanatory essay, and after the break we'll start working towards an argumentative essay. And those get highlighters, but a short story doesn't, but sometimes we use highlighters for various parts. So a personal narrative means story. So it's something that's actually happened to you. So you're going to think of a memory of yours. And remember, we talked about this in class. It was your homework, and I talked about it over the course of the week. And it's going to be something that's actually happened to you, and you can embellish it. I haven't embellished mine. I'm going to write 2 this week, so you can kind of get an idea of like different things that you can do, different techniques. And also I just have 2 that I just feel like writing about. And in my opinion, a personal narrative, it doesn't really take very much time once you have a plan, because your narrative will be no longer than 3 pages long. And we will double space. So that will be different than the hero essay. Double space just makes it easier for my eyes to see it because it's not highlighted. So I've given you a packet, and so you're going to go ahead and put your name on your packet. So first, middle initial, and last name. Okay, so here's mine. And you can see just various things you need to include. What you need to include: step 1, due Tuesday during silent reading. Step 2, we're going to draft on Google Docs. Now remember, a draft is when you type it in Google Docs, and every time you print, that's a draft, but it's the same document. You don't keep retyping, we just keep revising and editing. And then step 4, only the final copy this time will be printed, and we'll do that on Friday. And you can see here are all the due dates as well. So you're going to think of a memory of yours, and you're going to craft it into a narrative, a story, and you're going to follow the plot graph. And what you need to think of is not your story should be an experience of yours that was like 10 minutes or less. It shouldn't be anything that lasted days or weeks or an entire vacation. So if you, for example, want to tell a story of how you broke your leg, and you broke your leg at your cousin's house, and there were certain things that happened on the way up, and it really was the course of an hour or 2. Then what you would do with this personal narrative is you would use the art of flashbacks, and you would take it to right at that point where you decided to ride the motorcycle up the hill where you crashed and you broke your leg. So you would just do that right part, get the part where you crashed, broke your leg, or whatever your particular memory is. So if you need help shortening it, I can help you with that as well. So this is due tomorrow during silent reading. So every good writer has a plan. So you're going to fill out basically all the bits. These are going to be jot notes. So your exposition, make sure you have a conflict. It could be an internal conflict or an external conflict, or it could be both if you have something crafted really well. My particular narrative is an internal conflict. And it's very, very embarrassing. And then you have your rising action. Now, rising action, I want you to have 3 events, but sometimes you need more, and sometimes you need less. So that is not a firm, like you must have 3. It's one of those, good rule of thumb is 3. But just build up some suspense as we get to the climax. Climax is where problem's at its worst, and at some point you start seeing things differently. You change. And then you have your following action. Your following action, there are no required amount of events in the following action because this is a personal narrative and it's short. So your following action is probably going to be pretty short. Kind of cliffhangery maybe, or where the ending zooms very closely. So this one can be 2 events, it could be 3 events, it could be 1 that takes you right to your resolution. And then it's always tell me kind of a learning that you experience from that. So you can see the next page I wrote my most embarrassing narrative. And so I want to read this with you so you can kind of see what I did. one of the things that you need to make sure you do is you need to make sure that you I can't quite remember. It'll come to me in just a second. Sorry, this is the third time I made this video because the first time I rambled and sounded like an idiot, and the second time Miss Nancy came in to chit chat with me, and so I lost my train of thought. Anyway, so here's my narrative. You can see it is it fits the criteria because it is like almost exactly 2 pages. So when you type your narrative, you're just going to put your name and call it a personal narrative. The end. Some of you have a title. Great, use your title. And some of you don't have a title, and great, don't worry about a title yet. So let's start with mine. So your first sentence of your narrative, and I'm going to tell you, it's right here in your peer edit and your, oh poo, these are not right. Oh, these are totally right. These are backwards, they're stapled backwards. So here's your scoring guide that I'll fill out, and then the peer edit's spread on 2 pages. Anyway, your first sentence has to be an action, a reaction, or a flash forward. A flash forward is when you are at the end of your story. You broke your leg, you're laying in the hospital room, and then you say something like, here I am, and here's how I got here, and then you start your story. That can happen that way as well. And it's a hook. It's an attention grabber. So here's mine. The panicked feeling sank to my toes. So read along with me. First day, 7th grade. Nearly traumatized by the time homeroom began, I sat in my seat in the sterile classroom. So I'm trying to use a lot of imagery, a lot of thoughts and feelings, trying to make you feel where I'm at. So clearly, my setting is the 7th grade, which would have been 1982. Anyway, here we go. Nearly traumatized by the time homeroom began, I sat in my seat in the sterile classroom. I found my seat and waited with trepidation as the teacher told us our locker assignment. As he walked around the room passing out the slips of paper with our locker number and combination, I noticed the similarities between my teacher, Mr. Stoltz, and another infamous German. Mustache? Check. Strange German accent? Check. Degrading insults about how clueless 7th graders are? Check. He was not my favorite teacher. I was among one of the last students to leave the classroom to try to open the locker. My combination seemed straightforward. 27, 17, 7. It really was my combination. I found my locker and opened it with ease. I practiced it a couple more times and then put away my school bag, securing the door with a final spin of the lock. And we had the great kind of lockers where you spun it and it kept spinning. You don't. My locker was better. Sorry. Out of the corners of my eyes, I looked up and down the hallways. Everywhere I looked, I saw classmates I'd known from elementary school, but there were also many kids I didn't know, and I felt like they were all looking at me. Swallowing the feeling of embarrassment, I decided that I would check out the 7th grade hall. I headed north down the hallway. Drinking fountain, check. Girls' restroom, check. More classrooms. The classroom where I was to go for math, Mr. Stoltz's classroom. Library at the end of the hall. I peeked into the library windows and was surprised at the size of the library. Little did I know that my teachers would never bring me here to check out books. So I tried to give you some thoughts and feelings. I tried to give you some character traits that I was a really, really shy person. Satisfied, I headed south down the hallway, passing things I'd noticed before. There were so many new faces, it was overwhelming. Once I passed my locker, I kept walking down the hallway. Boys' restroom, more classrooms, including the room where I was signed up to take typing, the ISS room, whatever that was, and the office. I noticed a lot of movement going on in the office. I went back to my locker to get my binder and notebook for my first class, English with Miss Kreider. I hadn't seen her classroom yet, so I knew I had to walk through the 9th grade hallway to get there. I couldn't have prepared myself for what I was about to witness. So here's where I try to start building up some suspense. You know, that feeling of excitement, tension, fear, or dread. So you can kind of see that because that's before your climax. I want you to build suspense as well. I walked up to the entrance to the 9th grade hallway and gasped. It looked like pandemonium. It looked like a mass of zombies reaching and grabbing for school supplies, swaying and dancing to the music. The noise was deafening. These kids were big. There were wall-to-wall bodies, and they were nowhere near the size of 7th grade bodies. Whereas the 7th grade hallway was calm and quiet, the 9th grade hallway was the exact opposite. Bodies, textbooks, pencils, erasers, and notebook paper were strewn everywhere. There wasn't a pathway to even walk. It sounded like a party with music and dancing, but I hadn't been invited. And I stood there, white-knuckled and trembling. A line was forming behind me of other kids who needed to cross through the 9th grade hallway to get to their first period class. Something along the wall of windows caught my eye, and I noticed the sunbeams streaking across the hallway. There was something peaceful about it, calming. It was so bright you could see the specks of dust dancing in the air. My eyes followed the closest sunbeam from the window pane to the line of lockers. And then I saw him. Tall, blonde, strong. Ding-dong, ding-dong. The girl behind me said, "That's Kelly Donahue." And then he smiled at me. Instantly, my face turned 10 shades of red. I could feel the heat from my cheeks, which embarrassed me even more. My knees turned to liquid. My heart started beating harder. Suddenly, the noises in the hallway were silenced, replaced by the thudding beat of my heart. I dropped my eyes and looked to the floor, searching for something that was familiar to me, familiar to calm me down. No matter what, I couldn't look in his direction again. How on earth was I going to walk by his locker to get to class? So here I'm getting at my climax. I willed my feet to take a step. My body would not respond to my urgent demand. The line of students behind me grew impatient. "Oh, come on, Stacy, just take a step." So my climax. I know, it's exciting. I looked back at the windows, at the clear blue sky. I realized this is it. Life is meant to be lived and not feared. I turned to face forward and took the first step into that crowded hall right by his locker. I'll never know if he was watching me pass by or if he even realized what that moment meant to me. So you can see my following action and resolution are like close, because I tried really hard to build up that suspense, and it really is walking by a particular boy that boys are trouble. No offense, boys. Girls are trouble too. So if you feel this intense embarrassment and you can't even speak around another person, you should go home. You should clean your room. You should go for a walk. You should mow the grass. You should talk to people and not let it run your life by any means. Anyway, so that's my essay. And here's the funniest thing. If you have Mr. Donahue, I grew up in Moses Lake. Mr. Donahue, I don't know where he grew up. He did not grow up in Moses Lake. Kelly Donahue is Mr. Donahue's second cousin. They're related. Don't bring it up to Mr. Donahue. It's too embarrassing. Anyway, yeah, it's a small world. It's sort of weird. Anyway, so here is how I'll score you. Hey, put your name on it right now. The one that says Personal Narrative Scoring Guide. Put your name on it. First, middle, initial, and last. That makes Friday even easier. And then we're going to do 2 peer edits. They're separated. Sorry about that. And then you have a beautiful clean back piece of paper. I don't know. Take notes, whatever you need to do. So let's recap. You are going to start today. You're going to work on your graphic organizer. You are going to start typing. We're going to draft this in Google Docs. Make sure you're always looking at that scoring guide, making sure that you include all the important things that you need to include, like the first sentence of your story is an action, reaction, or flash forward. If I were you, if you're struggling with this, skip it. Come back to it after you get some more of your story crafted. Make sure that you are telling the story, so you use first-person narrative, I. Describe your setting, where and when. In my story, you know I'm in 7th grade, but you don't know it's 1982. So I could do a better job with that. But at the same time, my story is, if you ask most people, they probably have that first experience where they meet somebody. It doesn't matter if it's 1982 or 2017. It's still a really intense, shy person who has puppy love. And make sure you build in some character traits. So any of these words, you forgot what they are. They're in their vocab binder, but character traits would be the way people look, the way they sound. I tried to give character traits to Mr. Stoltz. He really did remind me of a German fascist leader. He was really, really mean. He used to make me cry all the time. He used to make everybody cry. This friend, Travis Palmer, we cried in math class at least once a week. And we had him for 7th grade and 9th grade. He was really, really hard to be around. And then make sure you talk about your conflict. Make sure you build suspense. And then the overall story elements, this part would be really key for you to take a peek at. Thoughts and feelings. So make sure you pause at least 10 times, at least, and tell me what you're thinking of during that time. And in your memory, you might not remember. This is where you use your artistic license and you can embellish it a bit. Make sure that you have 2 flashbacks. So I don't have 2 flashbacks in this example, but 2 times where you flash back to a previous memory of something. So I'm going to make sure when I craft my next 2 that I have that. If you have dialogue, we're going to add dialogue to your writing notebook on Monday. So it just tells you where you put the quotation marks and stuff. And then we have an example that helps you. But the key thing is every time somebody talks, tag it. And then every time they talk, you indent it. And they get their own line. So that's really, really important that you follow that if you have dialogue. I only have 1 piece of dialogue, so that worked out really, really great. And other than that, you are going to work. You can listen to music because music definitely enhances creativity, I think. I don't want to hear it, though, so make sure it's nice and low and make sure it doesn't distract. Like if you're constantly looking for music and not writing, then that's where music is a problem and you won't get it done. It'll make me sad. So it's 50 points. It's due Friday. It's a very short turnaround. You're only going to print it once. We're going to use more. I'm going to use more of the digital tools. See if I can try to edit or at least comment on things. I might just ask you to scooch. I ask you to scooch because it's my glasses. So I have to read at this part down here. So I can't see it from up. So when I say scooch, it sounds short. It's not. It's meant. Let me take a peek at yours. And then I'll give you a bunch of suggestions if you're like misspelling and things like that. Anyway, I hope you have fun with this. This is supposed to be fun. And we only have 5 quick days, so we get a nice vacation. So hopefully you can wrap this one up. So happy writing.